My wife served me tea that smelled weird. I swapped the cup with her mother, and then this happened. The moment you realize your life might be in danger is never accompanied by dramatic music or slow-motion sequences, like in the movies. For me, it came with the faint, bitter odor of something that didn't belong in Earl Grey tea. I remember everything about that evening: the heavy rain tapping against the windows of our modern suburban home, the distant rumble of thunder, and the way Rachel's smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she handed me the cup. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why that cup of tea changed everything, you need to know what led to that moment. My name is Daniel Mercer. 10 years ago, I was working out of my garage with nothing but a laptop and an idea that everyone said would fail. Now Mercer Tech employs over 200 people and our security software protects some of the biggest companies in the country. It wasn't luck. It was 18-hour days, missed vacations, and the kind of stress that turns your hair gray before 40. Mine started graying at 37, just as the company finally stabilized. That's when I met Rachel. She was stunning, tall, confident, with auburn hair and a laugh that made heads turn at the charity gala where we first locked eyes. She worked in marketing for a non-competing tech firm, had traveled to 26 countries, and could talk about everything from quantum computing to Renaissance art. I fell hard and fast. Within a year, we were married in a lavish ceremony that made the local business pages. For 3 years everything seemed perfect. Rachel left her job to focus on supporting my career, as she put it. She hosted dinner parties with potential investors, organized my chaotic schedule, and always knew exactly what to say when I was stressed about work. I thought I'd won the lottery of life: successful company, beautiful wife, and the respect of my peers. I was so wrapped up in my apparent good fortune that I missed the warning signs. It started with small things. Rachel began spending more time with her mother, Judith, a retired corporate lawyer with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. I never particularly warmed to Judith, but I respected her intelligence and business acumen. The two of them would go silent whenever I walked into a room, their heads previously bent together in hushed conversation. Rachel would casually slip her phone into her pocket, the text conversation disappearing before I could glimpse it. "Just planning your birthday," she'd say with that same smile that now seemed practiced rather than genuine. My birthday was still 4 months away. The business dinners changed too. Rachel used to let me take the lead, knowing how important these connections were for Mercer Tech. Lately though, she had been steering conversations toward my health. "Daniel's been working himself to death," she told Martin Chen, one of our biggest investors, during dinner last week. "I worry about his blood pressure. Don't you think he looks tired?" I didn't look tired. I'd been sleeping well and hitting the gym regularly. Later that night, when I asked her about it, she brushed it off. "I just want people to know how hard you work, honey. Is that a crime?" Then came the documents. Corporate restructuring papers that Rachel said were just routine updates. Our lawyers had sent over. When I said I needed time to review them carefully, her normally composed face twitched with annoyance. "You don't trust me?" she asked, her voice carrying a subtle edge I'd never heard before. "I already went through them with Mom. It's standard boilerplate stuff." That was the first time something cold slithered down my spine, a primal warning signal. Why was my wife's mother reviewing my company documents before I did? I took the papers to my office and locked them in my desk drawer, promising to look at them the next day. I never told Rachel that I'd installed a small camera in my home office after noticing things on my desk weren't quite where I'd left them. The footage showed her entering at 2:17 a.m., trying my desk drawer, then leaving frustrated when she found it locked. She returned to our bedroom and whispered into her phone for nearly 20 minutes, though I was supposedly sleeping right next to her. I never felt her get back into bed, because I wasn't there. I'd fallen asleep in the guest room after a late night of work. Tonight was the breaking point. Rachel had insisted on hosting a dinner with her mother to discuss family financial planning. The conversation repeatedly circled back to contingency plans, with Judith asking pointed questions about Mercer Tech's succession protocols. "Many CEOs have emergency management provisions," Judith noted casually over dessert. "Someone who can step in temporarily if you're incapacitated. Have you considered designating Rachel for that role?" Given her familiarity with the business, naturally. Rachel's eyes never left my face as I answered, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. "The board would appoint an interim CEO from the executive team," I replied. That's standard practice. But you're the majority shareholder, Judith pressed. You could change that with a simple amendment. After dinner, Judith and Rachel retreated to the kitchen, leaving me in the dining room, nursing a glass of scotch and a growing sense of unease. Their whispers carried just enough for me to catch fragments. Needs to sign soon, and can't wait much longer. When Rachel returned with tea, her hands trembled slightly as she set the cups down. Judith watched me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Your favorite, Rachel said, pushing a steaming cup toward me. Earl Grey. I brought the cup to my lips, pretending to blow on the hot liquid. That's when I noticed it beneath the familiar bergamot scent was something else. Something medicinal and bitter that didn't belong. My mind raced as I pretended to check a text message on my phone. Oh, looks like there's an issue at the server farm. I lied smoothly, setting my phone down next to Judith's cup. Then, with a casual movement that I hoped appeared natural, I switched our cups while reaching to retrieve my phone. Might need to handle this quickly. Rachel's eyes widened fractionally, but she said nothing. Judith, distracted by something Rachel was saying about a vacation property, lifted the cup to her lips and took a substantial sip before I could process the magnitude of what I'd just done. The next few moments would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my life, and the woman I had promised to love until death parted us. What I didn't realize then was just how literal that vow might have become, and how close death had actually come to parting us that night. The teacup clattered against the saucer as Judith's hand suddenly lost its strength. Her eyes widened, confusion washing over her face, before it contorted into something else entirely: panic. Mom? Rachel's voice cracked with alarm, but there was something beneath it that made my blood run cold. Not surprise, not confusion, it was recognition. Judith clutched at her throat, her breathing becoming labored. I don't, she gasped, her words slurring slightly. Something's wrong. Her normally composed demeanor crumbled as she tried to stand, knocking over her chair with a crash that seemed to echo through the silent house. Rachel shot to her feet, rushing to her mother's side. Only then did she look at me, and what I saw wasn't concern for her mother. It was fear directed at me. Not fear for me, fear of me. Call an ambulance, she shouted, her voice unnaturally high. I was already pulling out my phone, mind racing as I dialed 911. As I reported the emergency, my eyes never left the untouched teacup that had been meant for me, the one I'd skillfully passed to Judith instead. My mother-in-law has collapsed, I told the dispatcher, trying to keep my voice steady. She's conscious but having trouble breathing. Possible allergic reaction? The lie came easily, though I was certain this was no allergic reaction. Judith's eyes rolled back as her body began to go limp. Rachel cradled her mother's head, whispering fiercely in her ear. I moved closer, straining to hear. Wasn't supposed to happen like this. I caught fragments of Rachel's whispered words before she noticed me hovering and fell silent. The ambulance arrived in 11 minutes that felt like an eternity. I stood back as paramedics swarmed our dining room, attaching monitors and starting an IV. One of them, a young woman with sharp eyes, asked what Judith had consumed. Just tea, Rachel answered quickly. Earl Grey. We all had the same thing. The paramedic glanced at my untouched cup, then back at Rachel. Any medications? Supplements? Anything else she might have taken? Rachel shook her head too emphatically. Nothing. She's perfectly healthy. I stepped forward. She seemed fine until after drinking the tea, I said pointedly. Rachel's head snapped toward me, her eyes narrowing. As they loaded Judith onto a stretcher, I grabbed my car keys. I'll follow you to the hospital, I told Rachel, not wanting to let either of them out of my sight now. The drive was silent and tense. Rachel stared straight ahead, her knuckles white as she gripped her purse. Questions burned in my mind, but I knew this wasn't the time to ask them. Not yet. I needed to understand what I was dealing with before confronting whatever this was. At the hospital, they whisked Judith away to an examination room while Rachel and I were directed to a sterile waiting area. Rachel paced nervously, checking her phone every few minutes. I noticed she wasn't texting or calling anyone. Unusual for someone whose mother was suddenly hospitalized. Shouldn't we call your sisters? I asked casually. Rachel's two sisters lived out of state, but were close to their mother. Not until we know what's happening, she said too quickly. No need to worry them yet. Another red flag. The Rachel I thought I knew would have called her entire family immediately. 2 hours passed before a doctor finally approached us. He was middle-aged with tired eyes and a grave expression. "Mrs. Mercer's condition has stabilized," he began, looking between us. "But I need to ask you both some questions. Privately," he added, gesturing for me to follow him. Rachel immediately stood. "I'm her daughter. Whatever you need to ask." "I'd like to speak with Mr. Mercer first," the doctor interrupted firmly. "Hospital protocol." As I followed him down the corridor, I caught Rachel's expression, pure terror. The doctor led me to a small consultation room and closed the door. "Mr. Mercer, I'm Dr. Winters. I understand you were present when your mother-in-law collapsed?" I nodded, choosing my words carefully. "Yes, we were having tea after dinner." "I need to be very direct with you," Dr. Winters said, leaning forward. "The initial toxicology results show a significant amount of benzodiazepines in Mrs. Sullivan's system, a dangerously high dose, in fact. The confirmation of my suspicions hit me like a physical blow. Benzodiazepines? Like Valium? Something similar. Yes. Combined with what appears to be a strong sleeping medication." He studied my face carefully. "This wasn't food poisoning or an allergic reaction, Mr. Mercer. This was a deliberate sedative overdose. Had she taken the full amount in the cup, or had she been a smaller person with different metabolism, it could have been fatal." A chill ran through me as the doctor's words confirmed my darkest suspicions. The tea had been meant for me. My wife had tried to drug me, possibly finish me. "Does your mother-in-law take any medications containing these substances?" Dr. Winters asked. "No," I answered truthfully. "Not that I'm aware of." "Has she been depressed? Any reason she might have taken this deliberately?" I shook my head. "Judith is ambitious, determined. Not the type." I hesitated. "Doctor, I think you should know that tea was originally served to me. I switched cups with Judith at the last moment because I thought the tea smelled strange." Dr. Winters' expression changed subtly. "I see," he said slowly. "That's concerning. The police will need to be notified about this. These levels indicate intentional administration, not accidental exposure." I nodded, feeling strangely calm despite the chaos unfolding around me. "I understand, and doctor, I'd appreciate if you didn't mention our conversation to my wife just yet." As I walked back to the waiting area, I saw Rachel standing near the nurse's station, her back to me. She was on her phone now, speaking in urgent whispers. I approached quietly, catching fragments of her conversation. "Can't do it now. He's suspicious." A pause. "No, I don't think he knows everything," but another pause. "The documents aren't signed. We need another plan." I cleared my throat loudly. Rachel spun around, ending the call instantly. "The doctor says she'll be okay," I said evenly, watching her face. "But they found something unusual in her system, something that wasn't supposed to be there." Rachel's smile was brittle. "Thank goodness she'll recover," she said, ignoring my pointed statement. "Can we see her?" "Not yet," I lied. "They're running more tests." As we sat in tense silence, I knew my entire life had just changed course. The woman beside me, the woman I had loved and trusted, was now the greatest threat to my existence. And I had no idea why. The hospital released Judith the following afternoon. Rachel insisted her mother stay with us until she recovers fully, a suggestion that made my skin crawl. I agreed anyway, knowing I needed to maintain appearances, while I uncovered what they were planning. "I'll set up the guest room," I offered, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Rachel looked surprised by my hospitality toward the woman who had nearly drunk poison meant for me. "That's thoughtful of you, Daniel." I smiled tightly. "Family first, right?" Once they were settled, I made an excuse about checking on a work emergency and locked myself in my home office. The documents Rachel had been so eager for me to sign were still in my desk drawer. Now, I studied them with new eyes. The papers appeared innocuous at first glance. Standard corporate modifications that any growing company might consider. But buried in the dense legal language was a clause that sent ice through my veins. In the event of my temporary incapacitation, all decision-making authority would transfer to a designated proxy, Rachel, with full signatory powers. "Not my CFO, not my CFO, not my CFO," My wife, who had no official role at Mercertech. Another clause, even more damning, granted this proxy the right to liquidate assets as necessary for the company's ongoing operations. The definition of necessary was left deliberately vague, a legal loophole big enough to drive a truck through. I picked up my phone and called Marcus Wong, a college friend who had become one of the city's top corporate attorneys, and importantly, someone Rachel had never met. "I need to see you today, and Marcus, tell no one I'm coming." 2 hours later, I sat in Marcus's office as he reviewed the documents, his expression growing grimmer by the minute. "Daniel, this is," he trailed off, searching for words. "Whoever drafted this created a sophisticated trap. If you became incapacitated, which by the way, is defined here in remarkably broad terms, Rachel would essentially own Mercertech without officially owning it. She could sell off divisions, intellectual property, anything of value. And if I died?" The question hung in the air. Marcus's expression darkened. "That's the thing. These documents create a more favorable outcome for her if you're incapacitated rather than deceased. Your will would be subject to probate, challenges from other shareholders. But this?" He tapped the papers. "This would give her immediate control with minimal oversight." The realization hit me like a physical blow. They didn't want me finished it, at least not immediately. They wanted me compromised, unable to fight back while they stripped away everything I'd built. "Who wrote these?" Marcus asked. "My mother-in-law, former corporate attorney." Marcus nodded slowly. "She knows what she's doing. This is predatory." I filled him in on the previous night's events, watching his professional composure crack as the full picture emerged. "You need protection, legal and physical," he said firmly. "And you need evidence." Armed with Marcus's advice, I began my counter-offensive. I told Rachel I needed to travel for an emergency meeting with investors. A lie that gave me freedom to operate without her watchful eye. Instead, I checked into a hotel under a different name and made 3 crucial calls. The first was to Jack Renner, an ex-military security specialist who had overseen Mercertech's physical security protocols. The second was to Savannah Mills, a private investigator recommended by Marcus. The third was to my company's head of IT, instructing him to quietly revoke Rachel's access credentials to all Mercertech systems. I spent the next 3 days in a hurricane of discovery, each revelation more devastating than the last. Savannah uncovered that Rachel had opened 3 offshore accounts over the past year. "She's been moving your money in small increments. Nothing that would trigger automatic alerts," she explained, showing me the paper trail. "Very methodical." Jack's team installed hidden cameras and audio recorders throughout our home, while Rachel was out having lunch with a friend. "Completely undetectable," he assured me. "Military-grade stuff." The final piece fell into place when Marcus called with news that made my blood boil. "We found a draft purchase agreement on Judith's laptop," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "She's been negotiating with Vector Corp to sell them Mercertech's security division. Your most profitable segment. The proposed closing date is next month, contingent on management transition." Vector Corp, our largest competitor. The company that had tried to hire me away 3 times, then tried to steal our code when I refused. "There's more," Marcus continued. "Judith has been consulting for Vector Corp for 6 months. Paid through a shell company, but we found the connection." The betrayal was breathtaking in its scope. Rachel hadn't just married me for my money. She'd married me as part of a corporate espionage plot years in the making. Our entire relationship had been a carefully constructed lie. That night, the hidden microphones captured a conversation that removed any lingering doubts. Rachel called her mother while I was supposedly still out of town. "Vector Corp is getting impatient." Rachel's voice came through clearly on the recording. "Jack sent me. They're threatening to pull the offer if we don't deliver soon. We need to accelerate Plan B," Judith replied. The tea was too obvious. "Next time, we need something untraceable. I have contacts who can provide." "I'm not sure I can do this again," Rachel interrupted, a note of uncertainty in her voice. "What if he catches on? What if he finds out about us?" "Don't lose your nerve now," Judith snapped. "Think about the money. 20 million, Rachel. Your cut is $20 million. Are you really going to throw that away because you've developed a conscience?" There was a long pause before Rachel responded, her voice hardening. "No, you're right. I'll handle Daniel. The woman I had loved, had built a life with, was calmly discussing my imminent incapacitation for a payday. The cold, business-like tone cut deeper than any heated argument could have. I sat in my hotel room, staring at the recording device, feeling something inside me harden into resolve. They had underestimated me, assumed I was just another tech nerd easily manipulated by a beautiful face. It was time to show them just how wrong they were. I returned home on the fourth day, my strategy meticulously planned with Marcus, Jack, and Savannah. When I walked through the door, Rachel rushed to greet me with a hug that once would have felt like coming home. Now, it felt like being embraced by a stranger. "You're back early. I was worried when you didn't call last night." Her concern sounded genuine, her eyes wide with apparent relief. If I hadn't heard her discussing my demise with her mother, I might have believed her. "The meetings wrapped up sooner than expected," I lied, letting exhaustion seep into my voice. "It was intense. I'm completely drained." Rachel's eyes flickered with something opportunity, perhaps, before she masked it with sympathy. "Poor baby, you worked too hard." She helped me with my coat, her touch lingering on my shoulders. "Why don't you lie down? I'll bring you something to help you relax." "I bet you will," I thought, but nodded gratefully. "That sounds perfect." As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I heard Rachel on the phone in the kitchen, her voice a hushed urgent whisper. The microphones Jack had installed would catch every word. In our room, I made a show of taking off my shoes and lying down, then texted Jack. Phase 1 initiated. She took the bait. For the next 3 days I played the role of my life, the overworked, increasingly confused husband. I pretended not to notice when Rachel accidentally gave me the wrong medication for a headache I'd complained about. I allowed my speech to slur slightly at dinner. I left important papers in obvious places and pretended not to remember where I'd put them. "I'm worried about you," Rachel said on the third night, her hand on mine across the dinner table. Behind her practiced concern, I could see calculation. "Maybe you should see a doctor." "These memory lapses?" "It's just stress," I assured her. "I'll be fine once this acquisition deal is finalized." Her eyes lit up at the mention of an acquisition, exactly as I'd anticipated. "Acquisition? You didn't mention that before." I frowned, as if confused. "Didn't I?" "Vector Corp's offer for our security division. It's a substantial deal." I rubbed my temples. "Sorry, I could have sworn I told you." Rachel's composure slipped for just a moment, a flash of triumph quickly disguised. "No, you didn't mention it, but that's wonderful news, darling. We should celebrate. Let's have a dinner," I suggested. "You, me, and Judith. A proper celebration. I can share all the details then." The trap was set. Rachel agreed enthusiastically, already planning the dinner for the following evening. As soon as she left to call her mother, I texted Marcus and Savannah. Phase 2 complete. Final stage, tomorrow night. That night, I lay awake beside Rachel, listening to her measured breathing and wondering how many nights she had plotted against me while I slept. Trustingly beside her. The woman I'd built my future around was a carefully constructed facade. Behind those loving smiles and passionate embraces, had been cold calculation, each gesture designed to position her for the ultimate betrayal. The next day, I executed the final preparations. Jack's team installed additional cameras in the dining room, focusing on the seats Rachel and Judith would occupy. Savannah positioned herself in a van down the street, monitoring the feeds. Marcus waited at his office with his most trusted paralegal, ready to notarize sworn statements. I had one final card to play, one that had taken all of Marcus's legal connections to arrange on such short notice. Detective Elena Ortiz of the Financial Crimes Division owed Marcus a favor. She agreed to be present, watching from my home office with 2 uniformed officers. They would witness everything in real time, ready to move when I gave the signal. "You sure about this?" Jack asked, as we finished the preparations. "Once you start this, there's no going back. These women will go to prison." I thought about the recordings of Rachel calmly discussing how to incapacitate me, the offshore accounts, the forged documents. They made their choice, I said firmly. Now they'll face the consequences. At 7 o'clock, everything was in place. I dressed carefully, in a suit. Rachel had always said made me look powerful. If this was to be the final act of our marriage, I wanted to look the part of the man who had built Mercer Tech from nothing. The man they had grievously underestimated. Rachel outdid herself with dinner, preparing all my favorites. Judith arrived bearing an expensive bottle of scotch, her recovery from the tea incident apparently complete. No mention was made of that night or her hospital stay. A conspicuous omission that hung in the air between us. Throughout the meal I played my role perfectly. Slightly unfocused, occasionally losing my train of thought, repeatedly checking my notes about the acquisition deal. With each slip, Rachel and Judith exchanged glances, their excitement barely concealed. As Rachel served coffee after dinner, I noticed her hand trembling slightly, not from nervousness, I realized, but anticipation. This was it, their moment of triumph approaching. Whatever they had planned for tonight would be their undoing. Before we discuss the Vector Corp offer, I said. My words slightly slurred. There's something important I need both of you to review. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a folder. New management contingency documents my lawyers prepared. Given my recent issues, the board insisted. Rachel's eyes widened. So did Judith's. I could almost see the dollar signs reflecting in their pupils. These would give you full signatory authority if anything happened to me, Rachel, I continued, pushing the folder toward her. All we need is for both of you to sign as witnesses, and then I sign last. Rachel reached for the folder with barely restrained eagerness, not noticing the tiny red light of the camera capturing her every expression. Not realizing that the documents inside weren't what I'd described at all. Not understanding that she was about to sign her own confession. Let me read these over first, Judith said. Lawyer's instincts kicking in, just to make sure everything is in order. I smiled, affecting confidence, while masking a glacial rage. Of course, take your time. We have all night. Judith adjusted her reading glasses as she examined the documents, her face a mask of professional concentration. Rachel hovered nearby, barely containing her impatience. I sipped my coffee calmly, the only person at the table who knew what was actually in those papers. This looks unusual, Judith finally said, her brow furrowing. These aren't standard management contingency documents. Rachel leaned forward. What do you mean? I mean, Judith replied slowly. This is a confession. The color drained from Rachel's face as she snatched the papers from her mother's hands. Her eyes darted across the pages, widening with each paragraph she read. The document outlined, in meticulous detail, their plan to incapacitate me, take control of Mercer Tech, and sell its assets to Vector Corp. It included dates, amounts, and specific actions, all information I had gathered through my investigation. What is this? Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate calm. That would be the truth, Rachel. The truth you and your mother have been hiding for months. Possibly years. All pretense of confusion vanished from my demeanor. I sat up straighter, my gaze clear and focused. Rachel's eyes narrowed as she realized the implications. You've been faking, she said flatly. A taste of your own medicine, you might say. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote control. With one press of a button, the lights in the dining room dimmed, and a projector hidden in the ceiling fixture activated, casting a large image on the wall behind me. The image showed Rachel and Judith in our kitchen 3 days ago. I turned up the volume on the remote, and their voices filled the room. Once the new medication takes effect, he'll be completely pliable, Judith was saying on the recording. Vector Corp's lawyers will move quickly. The acquisition will be completed before anyone can contest it. Rachel's recorded voice replied, and the offshore accounts are untraceable. Completely. 20 million for you, 15 for me. We'll be in the Cayman Islands before the board even realizes what happened. I paused the recording and turned to face them. Would you like to hear more? I have hours of material. Very illuminating stuff. Judith recovered first, her legal mind already formulating a defense. These recordings are illegal, inadmissible, in any court. Actually, I replied, in this state recording conversations in your own home is perfectly legal. My lawyers confirmed it, and speaking of lawyers, I pressed another button on the remote. The sliding door to the living room opened, revealing Marcus Juan, alongside Detective Ortiz and 2 uniformed officers. Behind them stood Jack Renner and 3 members of my executive team. You've been busy, Rachel said, her voice icy despite her obvious shock. You have no idea. I stood up. buttoning my suit jacket. "Detective Ortiz, I believe you have something for my wife and mother-in-law." The detective stepped forward, producing 2 sets of official documents. "Rachel Mercer and Judith Sullivan. These are search warrants for your electronic devices, financial records, and personal property. We also have arrest warrants for both of you on charges of attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit fraud, and corporate espionage." One of the officers moved toward Judith with handcuffs. The older woman's composure finally cracked. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "You have nothing but some doctored recordings and wild accusations." "We have the tea," I said quietly. "The hospital ran tests. Did you know they keep samples when poisoning is suspected? We also have the offshore account information, the draft agreements with Vector Corp, and those interesting little pills found in Rachel's purse, the ones that match what was in the tea." Rachel remained eerily calm as the second officer approached her with handcuffs. "You won't go through with this," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "You still love me, I can see it." For a moment the room seemed to hold its breath. Did some part of me still love the woman I thought I had married? Perhaps, but that woman had never existed. "The only thing I still love," I replied evenly, "is the company you tried to steal from me. Take them away, detective." As they were led out in handcuffs, my executive team approached, their faces a mixture of shock and concern. "Daniel, is this why you asked us to come?" asked Helena Chen, my CFO. "You could have told us what was happening." "I needed genuine reactions," I explained. "If this goes to trial, you'll all be witnesses. Your testimony about their behavior tonight will be crucial." Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder. "It might not go to trial. The evidence is overwhelming. Their lawyers will push for a plea deal." I nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of everything that had transpired. My marriage was over. My trust had been shattered. The life I thought I had built was a carefully constructed illusion. The next hour passed in a blur of statements and signatures. Detective Ortiz's team collected evidence, while Marcus explained the legal process ahead. My executives huddled in the corner, already discussing how to handle the inevitable media storm. When the last police car finally pulled away, I found myself alone in the house that had once been my home. I wandered into the kitchen, remembering countless mornings with Rachel, her laugh as she burned toast, the way she danced to invisible music while making coffee. Had it all been an act? Every moment? Every kiss? I would probably never know. On the refrigerator door hung a photo of us from our honeymoon in Bali. Rachel's arms around my neck, both of us smiling into the sun-drenched camera. I took it down and stared at the face of the woman who had planned my destruction with the same lips that had told me she loved me. Then, I tore the photograph in half and dropped the pieces into the trash. My phone buzzed with a text from Jack, "Perimeter secure. All clear." Even now he was watching out for me, making sure neither Rachel nor Judith had accomplices waiting to retaliate. I poured myself a glass of scotch, not the bottle Judith had brought, and walked to the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Rachel was being processed into a holding cell, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her, just as she had planned for mine. I raised my glass to my reflection in the window, alone, betrayed, but still standing. "To new beginnings," I whispered to no one in particular. The legal machinery moved with surprising efficiency. Once Detective Ortiz presented the evidence to the district attorney, within 48 hours of their arrest, Rachel and Judith were denied bail, deemed flight risks due to the offshore accounts, and detailed escape plans found on Judith's encrypted laptop. I filed for divorce the morning after the arrest. Marcus had the papers prepared and ready, as if he'd known all along how this would end. Perhaps he, given the circumstances, he explained, this should be straightforward. She'll have no claim to your assets or company shares. The criminal charges alone are enough to trigger the infidelity and criminal conduct clauses in your prenuptial agreement. The prenup I'd insisted on, the one Rachel had called an unnecessary formality, but signed anyway, likely believing she'd found a better way to access my wealth. Outside my office window, reporters gathered on the sidewalk. News of the arrests had leaked, and Mercer Tech stock had taken an initial hit. I called an emergency board meeting to address the situation head-on. "Gentlemen, ladies," I began, looking at each board member in turn. "I know you have questions. I owe you the complete truth." For the next hour I laid out everything: the poisoning attempt, the investigation, the Vector Corp connection. I showed them the evidence, sparing no details. When I finished, the room was silent. Finally, Howard Greenberg, our longest-serving board member, spoke up. "Daniel, why didn't you come to us when you first suspected something?" "Because I didn't know how deep this went," I answered honestly. "I needed to be certain I wasn't just a paranoid husband before bringing such accusations to this board." Meredith Zhao, our newest board member, leaned forward. "And Vector Corp's involvement?" "Their CEO denies knowledge of the plot," I said. "Claims it was orchestrated by their head of acquisitions, who has conveniently resigned and left the country. I don't believe them, but proving corporate involvement will be difficult." "So what now?" Howard asked. I unveiled the recovery plan I'd been developing with Helena over the past 2 days. A comprehensive strategy to stabilize our stock price, reassure clients, and strengthen our corporate to prevent any similar vulnerabilities. The vote to approve my plan was unanimous. As the board members filed out, each one stopped to shake my hand or offer a word of support. Their solidarity meant more than they could know. Later that day, I called a company-wide meeting. Standing before the assembled employees of Mercer Tech, the people who had helped build my vision into reality, I felt a strange sense of calm. "Many of you have heard rumors," I began, "about my wife, about arrests, about corporate espionage. I'm here to tell you that yes, there was a plot to take control of Mercer Tech. Yes, it involved my wife and her mother. And yes, we have stopped it." A murmur ran through the crowd. "I founded this company on 2 principles: innovation, integrity. Recent events have tested the latter, but they have not broken it. Mercer Tech stands stronger today than ever before." I paused, looking out at the sea of faces, some concerned, some curious, all attentive. "I won't lie to you, the coming months will be challenging. Our competitors will try to use this situation against us. Clients may question our stability, but I make you this promise. Mercer Tech will not just survive this, we will emerge stronger." The applause that followed wasn't just polite, it was enthusiastic, supportive. These people believed in me and what we were building together. Their faith renewed my own determination. The weeks that followed proved me right about the challenges. Vector Corp launched an aggressive campaign to poach our clients, spreading rumors about our company's stability. 2 major accounts wavered, but ultimately stayed after I personally met with their CEOs. Rachel and Judith both accepted plea deals rather than face trial, as Marcus had predicted. Rachel's sentence was 8 years for attempted poisoning and conspiracy. Judith received 12 due to her role as the mastermind and her previous legal expertise, which the judge deemed an aggravating factor. I attended neither sentencing. By then I had moved out of our house into a downtown loft. The suburban home held too many memories, all of them now tainted. 6 months after that fateful cup of tea, I sat in my new office, reviewing quarterly results with Helena. Mercer Tech had not only recovered but was thriving. Our stock price had reached an all-time high, and we just secured a contract that would ensure our growth for years to come. "You should be proud," Helena said, studying me over her glasses. "Most companies wouldn't survive this kind of scandal. Most companies don't have employees like ours." I replied. After she left, I walked to the window overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere out there, Rachel was beginning her first year of an 8-year sentence. I no longer imagined her face when I closed my eyes at night. I no longer reached for her in my sleep. The healing had been gradual but real. The betrayal had changed me, made me more cautious. Perhaps, but also more resilient. I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder, dinner with Jack and his wife. Then another. Savannah's agency wanted to bring me on as a consultant for corporate security. Life was moving forward. As I gathered my things to leave the office, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of my computer screen. The gray at my temples had spread a bit more, but my eyes were clear and focused. The man looking back at me had been broken but had rebuilt himself stronger at the mended places. I remembered something my grandfather used to say, "Trust your instincts, boy. They'll save your life someday." He had been right. That odd smell in a cup of tea had saved everything. My company, my future, possibly my life. But it wasn't just instinct that had saved me. It was the courage to act on that instinct, to trust my gut when everything else told me I was being paranoid. It was the strength to face an unbearable truth, that the person I had trusted most was orchestrating my downfall. As I switched off my office light and headed for the elevator, I made a silent promise to myself: I would never ignore that inner voice again, no matter how improbable its warning seemed. Some might call it paranoia. I called it survival. And I had survived.